And today I'm going to show you how you can save 30 minutes a day using Vim as your text editor. So quick schedule, I'm just going to go over what is Vim, why you should use Vim, how to use it, and I'll keep any questions till the end, and I'll answer any questions at the end. So starting with what is Vim, so basically if you go to any terminal, and you just type in Vim. I also have this little box here that'll show all my keystrokes. You get this screen. So Vim is the successor to a different text editor called VI, which was created in like the 70s. So Vim is just short for VI improved, and VI is short for visual. VI came out in the 70s, and Vim was released in the 90s and is used heavily till today. So one of the first things people ask when they enter Vim is, how do I get out of Vim? I accidentally came to Vim and I don't know how to quit this thing. There's no escape button. So if you notice right here, it says type :Q, enter to exit. So if we just type :Q and then enter, we're out. We're back to where we started. So for today, we want to be inside Vim. So let's stay in here. So the first thing is to start typing in Vim, you have to enter insert mode. So this is what makes Vim a little different from other editors, is this idea of different modes. Usually if you're using Word, Google Docs or Microsoft Word or whatever, you can type in, you're always in what we consider insert mode. So you hit I to enter insert mode, and the bottom left tells you which mode you're in. And now you can just type in text as normal, right? Hello, name is Jack. And when we're in insert mode, pretty much this is identical to any type of text editor. So you can type code in here. If I type in something like function get skincare master, we can return Julia, right? Reference to our last laser talk. But so when you're inside insert mode, there's pretty much nothing different from a regular text editor. So where the magic starts is when you exit insert mode and you go into normal mode. So if you hit escape, you enter normal mode. So in normal mode, now we can move the cursor around in a variety of ways. The most basic way to move the cursor around is you use the letters H, J, K, and L. So how this works is, in normal mode, let's say I'm on this letter J. If I press H, goes left, J goes down, K goes up, and L goes right. And you can hit these a number of times. It's kind of like arrow keys, except they're all in one row. So that's the basics of moving around there. Next part is if you hit W, well, pretty much all of the keys on your keyboard are mapped to some sort of command in Vim. So and they try to keep it as close to English language sounding as possible. So if you're on a word and you type the letter W, it'll jump to the next word. If I hit W again, it jumps to the next word. And if I hit B, it goes back a word. If I hit B again, it goes back another word. So that's pretty much the basics of Vim. This is like the very minimum you would need to get started. Yeah. So back to the slides for a second. Oh, I lost my presenter view here. Okay. Oh, so that's what Vim is. So something funny I thought about was this idea of selling Vim. Like if you were, Vim is free for use, and it always has been and always will be, but selling you the idea to spend your time to learn Vim. I think it would be really difficult to be a salesman for a variety of reasons. Like somebody has already mentioned, there's this meme that goes on about, Notepad, how long it takes to learn versus how quickly you can get productive. Notepad is very easy, no curve, but you don't get very productive. We'll skip Pico, we'll skip Visual Studio, and Vim, extremely steep curve, and then you're super productive once you get past that, once you get over that hill. And then Emacs, we won't even bother with Emacs because, like Shiv mentioned, there's this ongoing war between Vim user and Emacs, or as I would describe, between people who use a very powerful and useful text editor and then people who use Emacs. A couple other issues is I guess it's all relating to learning curve. It'll slow you down once you start using Vim. So this means if you're using it to code or write or whatever, at the beginning, it's going to slow down your day-to-day activities before you can reach a break-even point. In fact, it may take up to like using it every day for a month before you can break even on how it slows you down to getting back to how fast you were before, and then starting to get even faster than you were before. A couple other issues is it's not really a programming language. So if you spent the same amount of time learning a programming language, you might be able to create an app or website. Can't really do that with Vim. Even though there are Vim scripts and macros, you wouldn't really use Vim to make a web app, for example. The other thing is I found that it didn't really improve my resume. I've been using Vim for about 7 or 8 years, and it's been on my resume ever since. And I think 1 or 2 interviewers have ever even noticed it. That being said, let me try to sell you Vim today. So something that's crazy is Vim is everywhere, secretly, hidden in the shadows. Vim is everywhere. It's on every operating system. It's on Apple, Mac, Windows, Linux, Ubuntu, Android. It's everywhere. It's on every server. So if you ever SSH into some server running somewhere or a Docker image, it's like 9 out of times you'll find Vim there, even if it's a headless sort of server where you can't install Notepad or something. You can always depend on having Vim. The one time I didn't see it was on extremely slim Docker image, but yeah, very rare. Vim is emulated in almost every IDE, probably every IDE. So that includes VS Code, all of JetBrains stack. So if you're using IntelliJ or ReSharper or whatever, Xcode for sure. It's even in Google Chrome, but not as necessarily as an editor, but more as like the key bindings to navigate Chrome. It's in note-taking apps. My personal favorite is Obsidian. And it's even inside code judges like LeetCode and certain code sandboxes. The benefit here is you learn Vim once and you can use it everywhere. So the question is, when is this ever the case in the software industry, right? When have you ever, like the very first programming language you learned or the very first IDE you use, when has that never changed? It's always kind of upgrading and modifying. There's always something new. There's always something that we, learned in the past, and maybe the concepts are the same, but you're still moving on to like something different. But with Vim, every time I've changed IDEs or environments, my learnings that I had from 7 years ago have moved along with me, which has been immensely useful, since I don't have to like relearn, how do I join 2 lines in Sublime Text versus Visual Studio versus a Golang, for example. So now let's get into some real demos. So I actually personally don't use Vim from the command line. I'll use it inside an IDE. It's just not because I get about 80% of what I can do from the command line with all of the benefits of the IDE. So something on my left here is the Vim keyboard. So this is just a regular keyboard with Vim commands printed on top. So basically, every single one of these letters maps to some sort of command in one of the modes, either normal mode or insert mode. And there's some other modes which we'll talk about later. So for my first trick, you can just increase the font a bit here. Start with the string example I have here. Oops. So let's say you have this string. Okay, this is a real string I took out of a code base, but changed the values. So in this string, our goal is to extract a certain JSON object. But we can see that it doesn't even look like a valid JSON. It looks like something, part of it is valid, part of it is not. VS Code has highlighted one of the objects, but overall, I'm kind of confused as to what this exact structure looks like. So normally without Vim, I would probably go and find, okay, here's an open bracket, here's another open bracket. Well, there's actually a square bracket. So then this is a list. So then what are my items? Well, here's another open bracket, and basically it's just too much of a jumble. And this is actually a more simplified string than what I was really working with. So anyway, to solve this problem, we're going to use some of these features that Vim gives us. So the first one is going to be, oops, second. So the first one is going to be the F keyword. So let's say you have the letters A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, and you're on the first character here. If you want to find the letter J, for example, then we press F to find, and then J will jump to the first instance of this letter. So this can become very handy if you have several instances of that letter. So now if I do F, J, it jumps to the first instance of the letter. And if I hit semicolon, it'll jump to the next instance. And I can repeat that. Hit semicolon again, jumps to the next J. If I press comma, it'll jump backwards. So I hit comma again, jumps backwards again. And what's, yeah, so this of course can get handy the more and more you use it. Another, so that's F to find. Then the other key I want to talk about here is for bracket matching. So let's say you have some stuff inside two brackets. So right now my cursor is at this first bracket, and if I hit percentage sign, it jumps to the closing bracket. So this is very handy as well. I can just jump back and forth between opening and closing brackets using the percent sign. And Vim is smart enough to understand nested brackets as well. So let's say I have something like brackets like this. If I'm on this closing bracket, I hit percentage, it'll go to the appropriate opening bracket. So using these two pieces of information, actually, sorry, there's a third piece of information here. So percentage for brackets, so bracket matching. Now, the third piece of information is visual mode. So this is going to be the third mode. So we've talked about normal mode for moving around, insert mode for inserting, and visual mode is very simple. It's just for highlighting. So if I do V and then any motion key, so motion keys include pressing W for moving forward a word, or pressing B to move back a word, or HJKL. So if I press V and then W, it'll highlight one word. Well, it'll highlight up to the next word. And if I press it again, it continues highlighting. So once I have something highlighted, I can do operations on it. I can delete it. I can copy it. I can, yeah, those are probably the two most popular things you do. And you can combine this with, if you combine this all together, it may start to give us more powerful use cases. So putting this all together, going back to our goal, which is I want to extract out a JSON object from this big blob of text. So how I would do this as a Vim user is I want to find the open bracket, which I use F and then open bracket, open brace to find the first open brace. So now here I can just insert a few spaces, and I've already have my first JSON object. Next, I'm going to find the next open bracket. So I see it's a square bracket. So I jump to I press F and then open a square bracket, and that jumps to this JSON array. I can use percentage to jump to the closing bracket associated with this particular opening bracket. Then I can insert some more spaces. I'm starting to gradually isolate the object. So what I can do as well is if I start to use visual mode, I can see exactly how far, um, or I can highlight an entire object by combining the ability to, um, let me take a step back here. So let's say, so since we know that when I'm on an opening bracket, if I hit percentage, it takes me to a closing bracket. If I do V and then I hit percentage, it'll highlight uh, the object that's captured by these brackets. Then I can operate on this. I can delete it. I can paste it up here, and so on and so forth. Um, yeah, so I can continue to do this process of finding the closing bracket using percentage, inserting spaces, and I can start to see the pattern here where, okay, this is a JSON array which has nested objects, and each of these objects have a nested value object as well. So of course, you could do this. You could have taken this string, put it into a JSON validator, have it auto format or something along those lines. But the point of this exercise is more so to show a use case that combines the individual features and keys of Vim into one sort of use case. So yeah, so now I'm going to do another example. Let me just quickly check my agenda here. Okay. All right. Oh, so for the next example, a quick story. I remember I was maybe using Vim for about 3 years or so, and I had a team lead, and he saw me playing with Vim and stuff, and he said, Janik, it's cool that you like Vim, but coding is not really about typing. It's not how fast you can type, how quickly you can move lines around. That's not what makes a good engineer a good engineer. It's more about debugging and finding errors and finding problems. And I agreed with them. Of course, it's debugging is much more important, and architecture and that kind of stuff is much more important. But after he told me that, during my Vim use, I started to wonder, was he right or was he wrong? And I think he's wrong, and I'll show you why. So let's say you have a function here. This is just pseudocode. So yeah, this is just a pseudocode function for a test, a unit test. What this function does, very simple. It calls some sort of method called call API. It gets a result. And we want to check that the success value on this result is true. We also want to check that the result has values. However, when we run this test, we're getting false. So this is a little unusual because the result definitely has its success is true, but it's missing its values. We want this to be true, but for some reason we're getting false. So if I saw this, I think any developer may go and console.log out the result to see what's in the object. So let's say they did log out this value, and they were still getting false, or maybe they were getting null. Either or, which is still confusing, because if it's, how come only this value is null but this one is not? So maybe the next step would be to, let's go into this API method, start to debug it, trace through the logic, so on and so forth. So that whole process maybe takes us a few minutes, maybe 10 minutes. If it's a hugely complicated API with many integrations, it could take even longer. But I have Vim in my toolbox. So maybe the first thing I would do is I would just check the text. I would just check the string here. So I have my result model down here, and it has a bunch of variables. So I can't necessarily see right away what all of the fields that are available on this result model. So the first thing I would do is I can use this operator called asterisk, which is shift 8. And what shift 8 does is whatever word I'm on, it'll jump to the next instance of this word. So if I'm on assert true, and I press shift 8, it'll jump to the next instance of assert true. And this is true even if there's like a bunch of stuff in between. If I'm on assert true and I hit shift 8, it'll jump to the next instance of that. So if I'm on this is success variable, I would hit shift 8 and I see, okay, there's a Boolean, it says is success, looks good. If I'm on has values and I hit shift 8, oh, it doesn't jump anywhere. Oh, it doesn't jump anywhere. So that means this value doesn't exist. This I'm trying to refer to something that hasn't been defined. So now I know, okay, maybe I was using the wrong word here. So if I search, and Vim has its own built-in search using the backslash, forward slash, I always forget which one it is. And I can just type in the word values and it'll highlight any search results. So now I can see, oh, it's actually values. It's not has values. So I can jump back here, delete this, turn that into values, and suddenly we're getting true again. So this is an extremely contrived example, of course. It's maybe unlikely that you would have your data model in the same file as your function. But again, it's just to illustrate the point that there has been many real-life occurrences where by using just a Vim shortcut or key, I was able to catch either logic errors or runtime errors. So that was my example there. So I'm going to jump back to the slides again, get back into sales mode. Okay. So there's a couple of like different levels of editing power, right? So Notepad, nobody's really coding in Notepad, not that I know of. Anyway, level 2 would be IDE. You know, you get your compile time errors checked, you get shortcuts, so on and so forth. Then now we have GitHub Copilot, so that's pretty cool. I'm a huge fan, and you know, you get AI autocomplete. That's great, but you combine it all. You have the IDE, you have GitHub Copilot, you have Vim, and now you're pretty much unstoppable. Like nobody is going to be faster than you, except for one special type of being who is even more quick, which is the courtroom stenographer. They use a very special keyboard, which is like called shorthand keyboards. I think it's also something called N key rollover, which yeah, that's a whole another level of speed. It's like 300, 400 words per minute or something. Anyways, going back to the benefits of Vim here. So I think we already spoke about learning it once, you use it everywhere. And the other part is how quickly you can input, right? So at the core of our jobs, at the core of our jobs is computer use. At the core of computer use is typing. So Vim is a way to improve your typing, right? So this is your primary mechanism of inputting your knowledge into the machine that needs it, right? So upgrading that bottleneck to me is a worthwhile investment. So I would even go so far to say is if you change how you type, it'll change how you work. The other part is debugging. So I showed a few examples here, and there's so many more. There's so many more examples, so many other ways. In fact, there's like, I only showed a very, very small cross-section of what Vim is capable of, like a microscopic level in terms of how small. But yeah, the capacity to debug and to do work using Vim is very powerful. Then the last piece, maybe this is for me personally, but I'm sure it applies to many of you as well. There's something fun about getting really good at Vim. it kind of goes back to how I discovered Vim. I was at a conference at Adobe's headquarters in Ottawa, and Adobe was releasing this new IDE called Brackets, and people were excited about it. They're like, "Oh, we finally have the Sublime Text Killer." I think this definitely was before VS Code, and everybody's excited about it. Then the guy next to me was like, "Oh, this is just another IDE. What's the big deal?" And I was like, "Why? This looks great." And he's like, "Well, because there's a ceiling on all of these IDEs, right? Like you can master it, you can get good at it, but then at a certain point, you know all of the features, you know all the functions, and you hit the ceiling. But on something like Vim, there is no ceiling. There's no one who can really master Vim. It's just so many more tips, so many more macros, so many more plugins. So like it's just like this endless ocean of optimizing your own ability. So that he's like, if yeah, that was one conversation that someone had with me 7 or 8 years ago and changed my entire view and day to day. So how would you get started? Vim Tutor is actually built into the terminal. So on any Mac, I think I checked Windows as well. If you type in Vim Tutor, it'll start up this Vim tutorial that's just built into the OS. There's also a bunch of cheat sheets, like the one I was showing earlier. There's Reddit communities, and I would say the most powerful way to learn something like this is total immersion. So there's this guy who learned like a crazy number of languages, like 10 or 12 languages. And the way he did it was he would move to a country that spoke the language and he would stop speaking any other language except that language. So to say, so, and that would kind of force him to learn it much more faster. So I would say with Vim, use it everywhere. Use it in your coding, use it in your writing, use it in your notes, journal, whatever. And that's how you'll shorten that learning curve time. Last piece is walk by faith, not by sight. Because when you're starting to learn Vim, you're like, how the heck does anybody do this? There's so many, it's just too much. It's just so many jumping in and out of these modes all the time and figuring out which keys to press. And it, but if you just are down to deal with that pain, you'll be rewarded at the end. It's kind of like driving. It just becomes second nature, and I don't even think about it. It's just happening. So today's webinar was just the tip of the iceberg. There's still so much to cover in Vim that I didn't cover at all. There's still so much for me to learn as well. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. Sure. Question?
Two things. One, I did post a link to another great way to learn Vim, which is Vim Adventures. For anyone who hasn't played it, it's like a Zelda-style game where you just are the cursor in Vim, and as you progress through the game, you learn all the bindings and you unlock new bindings, which is pretty
that's
fun.
A great one. Yeah, that's a great one.
So I've played through that, and I tried several times to learn Vim, and I've yet to succeed at it. And I think the biggest thing that gets me about Vim is running into mode errors. And what I mean by that is that I forget, like in my mental model, what mode I'm in. And then I start typing, and it turns out that I'm not in the typing mode, and I just randomly do all this stuff to the text on the screen, and it just like bunks my whole text file that I'm looking at. And I'm wondering, as someone, because you've obviously been using Vim now for a lot longer than I've ever tried, and so I'm wondering how often that sort of thing happens to you.
It definitely happened to me all the time at the beginning. I would say now it's now it pretty much never happens, but if it does once in a while happen, I can catch it so quickly. Like maybe I'm in the wrong mode and I accidentally press delete. I'll notice it right away, and I can just hit U for undo, and I'm back to where I was. So yeah, I agree definitely that jumping in and out takes some used to, but at a certain point it becomes second nature.
Okay, maybe 2022 is the year then for me.
Awesome. Any other questions?
I think John had a question all the way back. Yeah, like, can you do, I don't know what the context was, but he said, can you duplicate it?
I think he just meant in visual modes. In addition, like you can yank and you can put, and that more or less covers the duplication.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Okay. If anybody else has any other questions offline, feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'm happy to talk about Vim. Yeah, thanks.
That was very good, Janik. I know you were worried at the beginning, but no, you were a very cool cucumber throughout the presentation. So that was very good. But who knows? You could do like a part 2 in the future, since there's so much to unveil with Vim. So we'll get started with the update. I'll share my screen this time though. Oh. Okay, so I'll let Matthew kick it off with the project kickoffs.
All right, we'll kick this off with the project kickoffs, and then this kickoff will be complete. So a couple of projects here to call out. So Metacomica. So this is a project that Fonson, Spiro, and Steven are on. So it's a pretty exciting new up-and-coming NFT project. So the whole idea is you're going to be able to mint your own superhero as an NFT and then own the rights to that for like future comics and, you know, eventually become the mogul of your own Marvel franchise. Next up, we have Jam City. So this is actually, they're a giant in the mobile gaming space. So Alex has kicked off that project and you can actually visit it. It's champions.io. So that's the project we're working on there. And if you look at the site and go, that's a bit janky, well, that's exactly why they brought us on board.